What's up, Barnhill family, and welcome back to your home for all things combat sports.
Yo.
So, guys, it appears Khabib has broken a little bit of unofficial news, and that is that we're going to get JDM versus Islam Makhachev at UFC 322 at MSG. Ilia Topuria had some comments, some advice for Jack Della Maddalena, which we'll get into. But, Nick, first, I think we get into the fact that we kind of all thought this was going to be the fight.
Right.
Khabib, usually when he says something like this, he doesn't come out and break something that's not going to happen. Typically what he says in these sort of scenarios are what ends up transpiring. So we're getting a little bit more clarity at 170 and 155 because Islam was kind of the swing player for both divisions. Is he actually going to come back down and fight Ilia, or is he going to stay up or is he going to go up to 170 once and for all and fight Jack Della Maddalena? It looks like we have our answer. And so I want to talk about that fight first, but then get into some of the stuff Ilia's saying and some of the rumblings there as well as far as what's happening next at 55. So initially, just thoughts on JDM versus Islam at MSG.
We knew we were going to get this one, and I'm so glad that we do see a little bit of clarity at 170. Jack Della Maddalena deserves to go out there and do great things. And honestly, 170 is not hurting for contenders. But when you have a guy like Islam, who has done more than enough for the UFC and unfortunately hasn't had the most successful and lucky run as a champion, even though he's won all of his fights, right? Two guys come up from 45 wanting to fight him. Arman backs out in the last minute, has to fight Renato Moicano. It's not exactly the legacy title run that Islam was hoping for.
Not the resume he wanted to build, but he still beat everybody across the cage from him.
Exactly. And you got to call it what it is. He's one of the biggest stars in the sport. He's one of the most dominant fighters in the sport, and he's asking to go up. He's been patient about it. In fact, when his friend Bilal was the champion, he was deciding, all right, I'm going to cut some weight once again and just waiting for Bilal to end his title run. So I think this is the right time and the right fight for Jack Della Maddalena. I think it's a big fight because if Jack is able to beat Islam, now we're talking about a whole new slate of high-level stars in this sport and champions. Like, who would have thought Jack Della Maddalena, Ilia Topuria, Dricus du Plessis, and, well, I guess Tom Aspinall's not quite the same, and those guys were going to be running the UFC come 2026. But that day is almost here. And Jack Della Maddalena versus Islam, for me, is probably one of the most high-level fights. And I'm never the type to call a fight a striker versus grappler because in 2025, everybody's good at everything. But that does feel a little bit like, stylistically, one's going to be selling out for the takedown and one's going to be selling out to stay on the feet. So if Jack Della Maddalena can keep this fight standing for as long as possible and try to, figure out Islam's takedown entrances, the way he likes to approach getting inside and taking the fight where he wants it, we could see a pretty competitive war. We also have to remember Jack Della Maddalena is close with the city kickboxing guys, with Volkanovski in particular. And one thing that is more valuable than anything else in MMA or combat sports, or any sports for that matter, is when you have somebody in your camp who has fought the person that you're fighting, or somebody in your team that has played the team that you're playing. That pays dividends. Volkanovski knows how Islam feels. And if you go back to their first fight, he was wildly successful at defending a lot of those takedowns. He was able to scramble really well. He was able to get on top a couple times. Now, I don't know if Jack is as good of a grappler as Volkanovski, and certainly body type plays a role in this as well. Volkanovski's very short. He's hard to get up under. Jack Della Maddalena is going to be a little bit taller than Islam, so it might be easier for him to get down, change levels, and get inside.
But also stronger, so that's the flip side of that.
But he's also heavier and stronger, and his strikes cost a little bit more when you come in. And now I'm not really willing to say Jack Della Maddalena isn't the striker that Volkanovski is, but it's a different set of skills, right? He's not going to be changing stances quite as much as Volkanovski. He's not quite as dynamic on his feet, but he's putting really clean boxing in your face. He stays just outside of range. When he does back up, when he feels you coming in and attacking, he doesn't just back straight up with his head high. He finds an angle to come off of, and then he looks to mount some more offense on you once again. Rather than disengaging and refinding the range, he just likes to take a step out, maybe take an angle off, and then engage right then and there. So I think this fight is actually very competitive, even though Islam Makhachev on paper might come in as the favorite, even though he's the smaller guy. I do think Jack Della Maddalena possesses a lot of problems for Islam. And if Islam isn't able to implement his game plan or if he runs into a little bit of adversity like he did with Volkanovski, will that be the deciding factor in if he gets his hand raised or not? Because if Volkanovski, who was a 45er, came up and gave you everything you could handle and then some in their first fight, what could a guy who's got Volkanovski in his corner and in his camp be able to do if he's naturally coming from 170 and lives at about 195?
Yeah, no, it's a great point. And I think that Jack presents a lot of different things that make him uniquely the most difficult test of Islam's career.
Okay.
I don't think Islam wants to do much striking with Jack. No. Let's just be real. Like Jack Della Maddalena is clean. Like
Crisp
his boxing is really sharp.
Oh, yeah.
He took it to Bilal Muhammad. I mean, he absolutely took him to school with the hands. And he's not really that easy of a guy to get on the ground either, as we saw. So I think Islam is going to go for broke with the takedowns in this fight. I don't think he's going to want to do much stand-up striking with Jack. I think he believes that he can exploit him on the ground. I do believe that he can get Jack to the ground. I do believe that he can control Jack on the ground. So it's going to be a very interesting dynamic, because in order to get to those positions where he gets Jack to the ground, he does have to put himself in the line of fire.
Right.
And Jack can crack. He hits harder than anybody else that Islam has ever faced, and I think that's going to be pretty pronounced. It's a really interesting fight for me, and what makes it even more interesting is to see Ilia Topuria chiming in, right? Because you can clearly see that Topuria is studying Islam Makhachev because he's giving Jack Della Maddalena advice as to how to beat him at Madison Square Garden this fall.
Yeah.
And what's really interesting is the insight as to what that advice actually is, because it gives you a little bit of a window into what Ilia might try to do if he were to fight Islam. And that is to say that he needs to be very disruptive with the straight body strikes, which is kind of interesting, because when you think about it, Islam is not the kind of guy that changes levels and shoots in on you. He does tend to get a lot of takedown success with body locks, with trips, with stuff like that. Different types of takedowns that allow you to stand more upright than crouch down and shoot in changing levels.
Right.
So good straight shots to the body actually do make sense, because when somebody's entering, that can be disruptive to their rhythm. Whether or not Jack is going to listen to Ilia's advice and take heed of that or not, it doesn't really matter to me, because it's interesting that we're getting an opportunity that if the Topuria, and let me not even just say if, when Ilia Topuria fights Islam Makhachev, what he might look to do to try to disrupt the all-time great at 155.
Yeah, and it really does give us a lot of questions to sort of chew on over the next few months while we see everything unravel, both for Ilia and Islam. But yeah, this fight, if Jack goes out there and does what Ilia told him to do, I really do think we could see some success. Now, what he said wasn't that much. He said you need to attack the body with some straight punches, and he kind of left it at that. We know Ilia Topuria studies his opponents very, very thoroughly. In fact, as far as I know, there's nobody else on the roster that is doing the AI analysis that he's doing. He has apparently stats from every single fighter in his division. He has every punch they've thrown, every kick they've thrown. Not only that, divisions of the octagon. So, okay, if they're in the center, if they're in the inner circle, they're more likely to throw these. The mid-range, they're more likely to do this. If their back's against the cage, more likely to do that. He has all of that sort of stuff buttoned up and written down. Now, he only told Jack one thing. He said, you need to punch the body. You need to attack straight punches, long punches towards the body. I think there's a whole lot more that he could probably give Jack Della Maddalena that he's dissected. And obviously he's had Islam in his sights for quite a while. So we know he's been studying him for quite a while. And when I think about the advice he's giving Jack Della Maddalena, it almost feels like the opposite of what you would want to do, because to get inside on a guy like Islam Makhachev, either you have to reach to hit that body because he's a little bit further away, or you have to jump in. And a guy like Islam only needs you to make one mistake with your balance or your footwork to get behind you and then get a body lock or something. Get something to where he's now controlling you. If he can push you to the cage, then his chances of taking you to the ground increase significantly. I think 100% Islam Makhachev will take Jack Della Maddalena down in this fight. We've seen a lot of people that aren't near as good as Islam Makhachev take Jack down. So if he's able to go out there and do that, Jack's going to have to figure out ways to get up off the ground. But of course, we always say the best way to get out of something is not get in it in the first place. So I think he should listen to Ilia, maybe try to look for those long body shots, and then do what he always does, which is pivot off, angle off to the other direction. Don't back straight up, because any direction you go in the cage, the wall is directly behind you if you back straight up. So it's really dangerous against a guy like Islam. I think Jack knows that, and I'm really excited to see what he decides to do, who he decides to bring in. Obviously, he'll have Volkanovski helping him out. I'm sure Izzy will be in there giving his 2 cents. Dan Hooker will probably be a good sparring partner. But Craig Jones is one of those guys. He's got a mind for the sport. He seems to be the kryptonite to the Dagestani wrestlers. And at least that's what he's marketing himself on YouTube as. And I think it's pretty good. I think he's a brilliant marketer. But I think that is a very beneficial team to have in your corner when you're going up against a guy like Islam Makhachev. We've got common opponents. We've got a guy that's coached against Khabib and Islam and all these guys multiple times, so he's got a familiarity to their style. I just think that this fight really could live up to the hype and then some. But yeah, this is the absolute right fight for 170.
Yeah, and it really kind of begs the question then, what's going on at 155?
Yeah.
And now that we have the clarity at 170, and really it's Ilia versus Arman, Ilia versus Paddy, Ilia versus Gaethje.
Right.
I mean, it's one of those 3 fights. We know that's going to be the next title fight. And it's really interesting to me because Chael Sonnen alluded to the fact that he knows that Arman is going to be the next opponent for Ilia. Now, Chael doesn't normally break news like that, and he does do a lot of parody stuff. He's very funny. If you watch his channel, he'll say stuff that's maybe not necessarily true, but usually when he breaks news, he has at least some legs to it before he says something like that.
Yeah.
And then you couple the fact that Arman has been in quote-unquote champ camp with Khamzat Chimaev for the last few months, traveling the world with him, and now in Southern California with Sam Calvita and the Fight Lab guys trying to get ready for this fight. Is that alluding to something? Is Arman in a champ camp quietly that we don't even know about? Is he preparing for a fight that we haven't heard or has not been announced yet? So I'm leaning towards it actually being Arman. And Ilia postures a lot. Ilia's a showman, right? He's like a Conor McGregor, but not quite as intense. He likes to call his shots. He likes to say brash things. He said, I would vacate the belt before I would sign up to fight Arman because he's unreliable. Now, we know that's not true. That's posturing. That's being that's hunting for clicks, and he's getting them, and good for him. But I believe that is the next title fight we see at 155. I believe it's a very good fight. And I'm actually interested to see how Arman looks after this long, sort of extended championship camp that he's doing on tour with Khamzat Chimaev right now.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because we all were assuming that Arman Tsarukyan was going to have to fight again before he got another title shot. You burn the UFC, they don't forget about it. They're going to put you through the ringer before they give you that, even not a better opportunity, but that same opportunity again. You just don't do that. But when you're talking about a landscape of a division that really is a little bit barren at the moment and just doesn't feel like any other fight makes sense, then I guess you do have to look at, okay, what should we do that would be best for the division and best for the champion and best for all the guys in the rankings? In my opinion, yeah, it's probably Arman. I think that Dricus du Plessis was saying that Paddy was fighting Justin Gaethje on his card. Obviously, that's not happening because that fight is happening this month and we haven't got that fight announced yet. So that one might still happen just later on in the year. I feel like that is the perfect fight for Paddy because if he beats Justin Gaethje, nobody would argue that he doesn't deserve a title fight. But he's currently ranked number 9 right now, and I could see a bunch of people, giving Ilia a bunch of nonsense for him fighting a number 9 guy when Arman's sitting right there. And everybody has now basically painted the narrative that Arman is the toughest competitor at 155 for Ilia to defend against. Now, I like your point about Khamzat's camp and now Arman being a part of it. He has been an instrumental part of Khamzat's camp. He's been with him from the Middle East to over in the garage in Sam Calvita's gym and everything that they're doing. Khamzat and Arman have been moving around together. Nobody goes to Sam Calvita's gym, the garage, the famous sweat lodge, the garage that's known for having the hardest workouts that you can possibly do for combat sports. Nobody goes there and does that when they're not in a fight camp, right? You only go out there and bust your hump for Sam Calvita when you're trying to get in the best physical shape of your life. And why would Arman be doing that? He's training with, side by side with Khamzat Chimaev. That tells you he's putting in the effort of a champion UFC fighter. So maybe he's already in camp and nobody said anything and they're just kind of keeping it under wraps right now. It feels to me like he's in the right place if he's going to be preparing to fight Ilia Topuria. It seems like you'd probably want to get in grappling rounds and sparring rounds with Khamzat Chimaev. That'd be pretty beneficial, and get your strength and conditioning up. And let's hope that you don't have any more backaches or anything like that come fight week. But I think Arman Tsarukyan might be in a champ camp right now. I think that fight is probably going to get announced pretty soon. And what Ilia said about vacating the belt might just be genius level promotion. He might just say, look, we don't really have a whole bunch of heat between each other. Arman's kind of a dud as far as promotional stuff. I'm not going to get too much banter back and forth out of him. So let me try to drum up some business. Ilia's a very smart guy. He understands every single aspect of the sport, from the punches and the kicks, from everything in the octagon, from the conversations, the Joe Rogan speech, all of that stuff. He's got it buttoned up, but he also knows how to sell a fight. He also knows how to promote fights. And I really do think that if you look at the landscape, Max Holloway is probably fighting either Charles Oliveira or Dan Hooker for a BMF. Justin Gaethje is probably fighting Patty for the next title shot. And that leaves Arman Tsarukyan with nobody else. Ilia Topuria just so happens to not have anybody to dance with as well. Everybody wants to see that fight. It just feels like a no-brainer for the UFC. And even though they usually don't give people second chances, it looks like they're giving Arman Tsarukyan a second chance.
Yeah, well, we got clarity at 170 at least, so let's see what shakes out at 155.
It's going to be an interesting end to 2025.
Yes, it is.